Who was it that made something which by definition is unmakeable? Well, how can you ask the question of what made something that is by definition unmakeable? That's an incoherent question. You can't ask the question, what made something that is by definition unmakeable? Because that's asking, what made an unmakeable thing? That's like, how many square circles are sitting in the sanctuary? I mean, it's a contradictory question. Now, is that definition of God arbitrary? Did Christians just, grab that out of thin air? No, it's not an arbitrary definition of God, and I'll explain to you why. Suppose we have a person A here, and he wants to borrow an iPod. And so he goes to person B and says to B, may I borrow your iPod? And B says, I'd love to loan it to you. I don't have an iPod, but I'll go borrow one from a friend and I'll loan it to you. So B goes to C and says, I've got a friend A who needs an iPod. May I borrow yours? And C says, no problem. I don't have an iPod, but I will go borrow one from my friend D and I'll loan it to you and you can loan it to A. So this sorry business ends up going on, and the problem is that every member in the series here is a borrowing lender. That is to say, nobody has an iPod. Everybody can lend an iPod only if they first borrow one. You with me? Now, if we keep adding borrowing lenders, we can do that forever, and poor old A here is never going to get an iPod. If we just keep adding more borrowing lenders. What we're going to have to do is to stop this sorry mess with something that's different, and this is going to have to be an owning lender who simply has an iPod that he didn't have to borrow first. Maybe he made it, who knows? But he owns one and he didn't borrow it. You with me? Now, if that happens, he can give it to him, and pretty soon he'll get an iPod. Now, instead of iPods, let's ask about borrowing existence. Here, A is a thing that had to have existence given to it, like I had existence given to me by my parents. So A gets existence from B, but B can't give existence to A unless B already exists, and B has to get its existence from something else, but that thing can't give B existence unless it already exists, so it's got to borrow from D, and what you have are borrowing lenders of existence. Nothing will exist if you don't stop with a self-existent being. That is, a being that simply exists in itself and didn't borrow it from someone else. Okay? That kind of being is what philosophers call a necessary being. That kind of being doesn't borrow existence from something. That kind of being has it in himself or itself. Therefore, that sort of being cannot not exist, because existence was never given to it in the first place. And it can't lose what it was never given. So the idea of God being the uncreated creator is simply the idea of God being a non-borrowing lender of existence, and it makes perfect sense.